On the 25th of December 2023, royal watchers in Sandringham were shocked by a sight not seen in more than 30 years. Sarah, Duchess of York, attending the annual Royal Christmas service with the rest of the firm. After decades of gaffes, business blowouts and innumerable red-top scandals, we were witnessing something of a Christmas miracle. Fergie was back in the fold. The Duchess, who as far back as 1992 had been told by Princess Margaret, and I quote, "You have done more to bring shame on the family than could ever have been imagined." That same Fergie has somehow managed the most unlikely of Sandringham sequels. No wonder jaws were on the floor. However, within 2 short years, Fergie would be banished for a second time. Only on this occasion, her Duchess title would also be going in the muck. Like her husband, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, her lies about contacting the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein after claiming all contact had been broken off was the final straw for King Charles. On this episode of Reading the Royals, we're going to explore how Sarah Ferguson had it all, lost it all, got it all back, then lost it all again. We're going to do this by investigating a series of fascinating images taken across her life that reveal the secret signs hidden in plain sight that now allow us to appreciate that Fergie wasn't waving, she was drowning. The crucial question being, was Sarah Ferguson a serial victim of circumstance, as she so often claimed, or was she, to put it crudely, an inveterate chancer who after decades of bluff and blaggery found herself suddenly, in her own words, stripped bare? Sarah Margaret Ferguson was born in London on the 15th of October 1959 to parents Susan and Major Ronald Ferguson. After her paternal grandfather died in 1969, the family inherited an 800-acre dairy farm, Dummer Down in Hampshire. The Ferguson family moved to the farm when Sarah was 10, and according to the ex-Duchess, she adored growing up in the countryside. Sarah's upbringing was unusual from the start, as her father was polo manager to the Prince of Wales, meaning she grew up surrounded by young royals. This included her future husband, Prince Andrew, who was just 4 months her junior. Indeed, according to some accounts, the young prince would sometimes play tag with Sarah while they watched their fathers play polo. However, behind the facade of bucolic bliss, Sarah was subject to the cruel and sometimes violent whims of her mother. According to the ex-Duchess, as a toddler, a red vein would sometimes appear on the centre of her forehead, which her mother called the sign of the devil. And on these occasions, her mother would attempt to, and I quote, "beat the devil out of me." When Sarah was 12, her mother moved to Argentina to be with her lover and future husband, Hector Barrantes. In an interview in 2023, Sarah noted, "I never truly understood why my mother left me, and it has taken me a long time to deal with my low self-esteem." In a separate 22 interview, she stated, "I just had my hair cut really badly. Then Mum left and went to live in Argentina. So from the age of 12, I felt she left me because she didn't like my haircut. I felt that it was all my fault that Dad had been left on his own to raise my sister and I." Setting aside Fergie's very specific take on the straight-line causality between a child's dodgy haircut and her mother moving to another continent, it's clear that deeper issues abounded from an early age, namely appearance and abandonment. With hindsight, it's now easy to posit that marrying into a family which regularly provokes global headlines and comes with forensic scrutiny of conduct was perhaps not the best choice for a young woman with crippling anxiety and poor impulse control. But in typical Fergie fashion, if she was going to make a big mistake, she was going to make it with the throttle fully open, which takes me to the first picture I want to explore. Taken in June 1983, it shows a 21-year-old Diana, Princess of Wales, and a 23-year-old Sarah Ferguson at the Guards Polo Club in Windsor. Although Fergie wouldn't marry Andrew until July 1986, I think this image perfectly represents the sum of all hopes for the House of Windsor in the early 80s. For context, by the late 70s, the firm was widely regarded as stale and aloof, barely teetering along. It was an institution clearly out of step with the difficult economic conditions of the period and utterly disconnected from the punk-era youth who regarded the phrase "God save the Queen" as a sick punchline to an obnoxious joke. With the introduction of Diana and Sarah Ferguson into the mix, there was a genuine feeling among royalists that the monarchy had turned a corner, had been revitalised and re-energised by these charismatic, intuitive women. Here were royals who felt like real people, rather than dour, distant figureheads. The fact that it was Diana who reintroduced Andrew and Fergie at Ascot in 1985 also added a sense that the Princess of Wales was perhaps going to change the monarchy for the better, from the inside, that the firm had turned a brighter, better corner. But alas, as we know, just 9 years after this photograph was taken, both Diana and Sarah Ferguson would be ousted from the firm. The revolution had been terminated. The monarchy was not for turning. Which brings us to the second image I want to explore. Taken in June 1993, it shows Prince Andrew, the Duchess of York and their 3-year-old daughter Eugenie at the Upton House School Sports Day. It has been less than a year since Fergie's affair with an American businessman, John Bryan, made headlines around the world. And I believe the discomfort in Andrew's face is apparent for all to see. But what really fascinates me is Fergie's expression. It's clear that she looks a little uncomfortable. But when we zoom in for a closer look, we see something else. A kind of vacant disconnect from the reality of the situation. Almost as if she thinks by pretending nothing is wrong, by existing in a kind of real-life family costume drama, that as long as the bad thing isn't brought up by anyone, everything is just fine. As long as no one mentions the betrayal and infidelity and global headlines, everything will be just a-okay. In a previous episode of Reading the Royals, on the subject of the fall of the House of York, I said that Sarah Ferguson had come to be widely perceived as a deeply unserious person. And I believe this image goes some way to illustrate what I was alluding to. That is, Fergie's seeming, unfailing inability to fully grasp the gravity of any situation she found herself in. To my mind, there are only two plausible explanations for this. One, that as a chronic people pleaser, the idea of being in trouble with those she sought to impress amounted to an existential crisis, something which, out of fear, she simply had to block out of her mind. Or secondly, Sarah Ferguson was the Del Boy Duchess. For our American viewers, Del Boy was a character in the long-running British sitcom Only Fools and Horses. He was a kind of Homer Simpson character in that every episode would begin with Del Boy's latest get-rich-quick scheme, which by the end of every episode would completely blow up in his face. And no matter how calamitous the consequences, Del Boy would simply go straight on to his next madcap scheme, no looking back, never feeling sorry for himself, never giving up hope that the next grift would be the one that made Del Boy the millions he had dreamed of from childhood. And like Del Boy, Sarah Ferguson did appear to many down the years as a witless, plucky rascal with a never-say-die attitude and a heart of gold. So far, so benign. However, later revelations about Fergie's relationship with the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein would bring that impression into sharp relief. At least the part about the heart of gold, but more on that later. In 2011, 15 years after her divorce from Prince Andrew, Fergie told Harper's Bazaar, and I quote, "I didn't want a divorce, but had to because of circumstance. I wanted to work. It's not right for a princess of the royal house to be commercial. So Andrew and I decided to make the divorce official." This remark struck a number of royal commentators as peculiar, given the fact that Sarah's career as a children's author began in 1989, 7 years before her divorce. Indeed, Fergie's first high-profile business failure, the supposed high-end retirement community Castle Care, also collapsed before her divorce. So I guess we should perhaps ignore the ex-Duchess's memory lapse about it being somehow wrong for a princess to be commercial. Nonetheless, her 1989 authorial breakthrough title was Budgie the Little Helicopter, a series she has always denied plagiarised the 1964 children's book Hector the Helicopter by Arthur W. Baldwin, a book about a plucky little helicopter who goes on adventures and makes new friends along the way. Despite the controversy, Budgie went on to have genuine success, being commissioned as a children's animated series that was shown in the UK and America, as well as being released on DVD in several international territories. Which brings me to the next photograph I want to examine. Taken in December 1995, outside the world-famous Bloomingdale's in New York, it illustrates very neatly, in my view, the second phase of Fergie's adventures in fortune hunting, namely becoming a media personality in the United States. This is the chapter that would see the ex-Duchess flog hair straighteners and juicers on the shopping channel QVC, write a tell-all book, My Story, that caused a deep rift with Diana over Fergie's publishing of shared personal details. It also included becoming a spokesperson for Weight Watchers, making the confessional TV series Finding Fergie from royalty to the real world, and setting up her own media holding company, Hartmore. Hence we see Fergie here on a New York sidewalk in full sales mode, like a street hawker selling replica watches on Times Square, except with a lot more class. It is Fergie we're talking about here. And if you were wondering, that's Budgie, the plucky little helicopter to her left. In my view, this image offers the perfect depiction of Sarah's hoped-for second act, namely Salesforce Fergie. A full year before her divorce from Andrew, and despite what she said to Harper's Bazaar in 2011, Sarah had clearly already stepped into the next phase of her life, which was, to put it bluntly, flogging Fergie. By which I mean brand Fergie. And from a marketeer's perspective, you can absolutely see the appeal. A celebrity royal with international name recognition, who's more than happy to hawk hair straighteners on a shopping channel. I mean, what's not to love? The short answer to that, unfortunately, was the business plan. For somehow, despite international licensing deals for Budgie, a best-selling autobiography, and producing the movie The Young Victoria, Fergie's New York-based media company Hartmore collapsed in 2009, just 3 years after its founding, having accrued debts of more than $600,000. Unfortunately for Sarah, the publicity around the collapse motivated the New York Post to sniff around the carcass of the company. In so doing, they discovered that the ex-Duchess's American charity, the Sarah Ferguson Foundation, had only released around £14,000 in grants in the previous tax year, despite having raised more than $508,000. In response, a spokesman said the charity subsequently made grants of more than $400,000. Shortly afterwards, the Sarah Ferguson Foundation was effectively shuttered. Which brings me to the next photograph I want to explore. Taken on October the 15th, 2009, it shows the ex-Duchess and her friend Geir Franzen as they attended Fergie's 50th birthday party at the Lanesborough Hotel in London. The party came just weeks after the collapse of Hartmore, and it was claimed to be a scaled-back affair from the originally planned bash involving 300 guests at Royal Lodge, which Fergie had been sharing as her home with Prince Andrew since 2008. The occasion was dogged by rumours of impending bankruptcy for Fergie, with the spokesman at the time saying she, meaning Fergie, has faced some challenges and difficult times with one side of her business, Hartmore. She's resilient, will work through the situation and bounce back from this. The spokesman insisted the birthday party was always intended to be a small affair and denied Fergie was on the brink of insolvency. Honestly though, when you zoom in to Fergie's face, does this really look like someone who's got the 50th birthday party they really wanted? What makes her expression all the more remarkable is that Fergie had been here before, several times. Indeed, back in 1996, when her divorce from Andrew was finalised, the palace took the extraordinary step of releasing the following statement. The Duchess's financial affairs are no longer Her Majesty's concern, but matters which the Duchess of York must discuss and resolve with her bankers and other financial advisors. I mean, one doesn't have to be a genius to read the subtext here. This is the Queen saying to the entire financial world, do not assume that I will be paying this woman's debts. I won't be. Indeed, according to Andrew Loney, author of entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, Sarah's debts were so vast by 1994, 2 years before her divorce, that, and I quote, she, meaning Fergie, needed bank approval to pay even modest cheques. But even then, according to a member of her staff, she always believed there would be a deal around the corner that would solve all her problems. And there we have it. The magic deal around the corner the ex-Duchess had been basing her entire life plan upon. Indeed, when you set the previous two images side by side, there's an obvious and frankly pitiful comparison that's impossible to miss. On the left, we have what literally looks like the opening scene of an episode of Only Fools and Horses, with Del Boy all gassed up for his next infallible jackpot scheme. And on the right, the final scene of the episode, where it suddenly hits Del Boy like a ton of bricks that the roof just fell in on his latest screwball venture. The Del Boy Duchess had struck out again. After just 3 years, Hartmore was no more. However, for Fergie, the next episode of her adventures in entrepreneurship would appear to many commentators as if it would surely be her last. That's because in May 2010, the British Sunday tabloid News of the World published a video purporting to show Sarah Ferguson agreeing to accept money from an undercover reporter in exchange for access to Prince Andrew. For context, a year later, the News of the World collapsed in scandal, and the reporter in question, Mazhar Mahmood, was jailed in 2016 for perverting the course of justice in a separate case. Nonetheless, Fergie has never denied it was her in the Sting video, where she assumed she was meeting a foreign businessman in a swanky London apartment. In the course of their interaction, the clearly inebriated ex-Duchess appears to accept an initial cash offering of $40,000 with the promise of an additional £500,000 being wired to a bank account. At one point, she can be seen clearly shaking hands on the deal and afterwards saying, "That opens up everything you would ever wish for. I can open any door you want and I will for you. Look after me and he'll," meaning Prince Andrew, "look after you. You'll get it back tenfold." Fergie admitted she had been drinking before the meeting in a subsequent interview with Oprah. Describing her state of mind, she said, "I was in the gutter at that moment. I'm aware of the fact that I've been drinking, that I was not in my right place." In the same interview, she also said something that I think was more enlightening than she perhaps imagined. There aren't really very many words to describe an act of such gross stupidity. I think this is the key to the whole of my life now. It's like I'm stripped bare. Notice what she did there? How seamlessly she slipped from culpability, such gross stupidity, to victimhood. It's like I'm stripped bare. While I certainly don't mean to question Oprah's historic handling of vacuous, victim-sink Brits, had I been conducting that Fergie interview, my immediate reaction would have been to say, "Yes, Sarah, you have been stripped bare by your own vulgarity, greed and utter shamelessness. You are not the victim here, you are the perpetrator." If you think that's harsh, please consider the following. After going on Oprah in 2010, when she admitted to a serious lapse of judgment and gross stupidity, she said the following to Harper's Bazaar in 2018. "I didn't do that, selling access." Then referring to the undercover reporter who duped her, claimed, "He wanted to start a business with me, and I said, if you're going to invest in my business, with that comes my family, because we're all a team together." But the way it came across in the video, it was so horrible because they cut it and edited it and changed it. That's right, 8 years after the event, Sarah Ferguson wanted the world to believe an entirely new version of events. One that she somehow forgot to mention to Oprah, mere weeks after the video of the meeting was published. And that's the thing about being a Del Boy Duchess. It also comes with being the déjà vu Duchess, because here we are again, back to what I intuited in the picture of Fergie and Andy at the school sports day. As long as the bad thing isn't mentioned, it shall be as if it never happened. And if it did happen, it wasn't what you thought it was just, what's the phrase? Fergie being Fergie. No harm meant, no harm done, in her mind at least. Which brings me to the next image I want to explore. Taken in October 2010, less than 5 months after the news of the world sting, we find Fergie back in Bloomingdale's, back in sales mode. That's because, despite the scandal, despite any shame, despite any humiliation brought upon the royal family, Fergie has coffee pots to promote, a gig worth a reputed £500,000 a year no less. And when you zoom in to the ex-Duchess's expression, one can't help but being reminded of the other similarity between Fergie, Del Boy and Homer Simpson. Their superpower is how utterly unembarrassable they are. And what a superpower it is, because that is how you pick yourself up and go again. No matter the mess, no matter the mauling, no matter the mayhem, next morning you get up and you go again, no matter what. To the Del Boy Duchess, the past is merely a pantomime. Recollections may vary. What matters is next. What more is there to chase? The vast pot of gold that is surely, achingly just over the horizon. Tellingly, 6 months later, when Prince William and Catherine married in April 2011, of the around 1900 guests invited, Fergie was not one of them. In fact, it would be more than a decade before she was again considered safe company for any official royal engagement. Which brings me to the next image I want to explore. Taken on December the 25th, 2023, I believe this photograph perfectly illustrates Fergie's miraculous, decades-long resurrection. Had it not been for her cancer treatment the same year, surely 2023 would have been her annus mirabilis. After more than 30 years in the wilderness, trips to Ascot with her ex-husband aside, Sarah was now back in the fold. Back at the very heart of the firm. From adultery to cash for access scandals, from failing businesses to fractured relationships. Here we can literally see the true reward for being truly, utterly unembarrassable. And I'm not being snide. Fergie simply never quit, never laid down, never said never. There was always a chance, however remote and unlikely, that after all the heartache and quixotic business side quests, everything would work itself out in the end. And by 2023, it appeared that it had. Fergie was forgiven. And I don't mind admitting, Sarah's historic, resolute determination has played no small part in why people were drawn to her in the first place. Whether you felt a benign sympathy for her, or thought it churlish to despise her, or indeed loved her, we all have a deep-rooted admiration for the soldier who simply refuses to surrender, no matter the odds, no matter the stakes. The one thing I think everyone might agree upon is that Fergie wasn't for quitting. And without that singular quality, I really don't believe this photograph would exist. But, dearest reader, the story didn't end here. Because while there are certain benefits to being absolutely unembarrassable, there is also, most certainly, a tax. And that tax is, not to put too fine a point on it, a chronic lack of moral curiosity about anyone who might benefit your goals. Because when the only thing that matters is what you gain from any situation or exchange, who you gain it from is not something to really concern yourself over. If you win, who cares if the deal you did was with the devil? Only that kind of easy conduct has a way of coming back to bite a duchess on her assets. In the case of Fergie, we have Exhibit A, the undercover journalist who duped her into accepting £40,000 in cash, which she later claimed, without proof, to have immediately returned, off camera naturally. Her lack of curiosity on that occasion cost her, by her own reckoning, £25 million in lost earnings. And Exhibit B, we have Jeffrey Epstein, a man she admitted taking £15,000 from to cover a debt, though according to Andrew Loney, the true figure may have been closer to £2 million. Epstein is also the person that Fergie described in a 2011 email as a steadfast, generous and supreme friend to her family, despite knowing at the time that he was a convicted child trafficker. Indeed, according to the Mail on Sunday, Fergie's supreme friend email was sent weeks after she had publicly declared in an interview, and I quote, A terrible, terrible error of judgment was made, my having anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein. What he did was wrong, and for which he was rightly jailed. In the same interview, she stated unequivocally, "I abhor paedophilia and any sexual abuse of children," and promised she would never have anything to do with Epstein again. However, this public vow would lead to 3 rather sticky problems for the then Duchess. Firstly, her emails showed that she had lied about breaking off contact with Epstein, the Supreme Friend email being sent weeks after she gave the interview disowning him. Secondly, it turns out she actually went on to privately apologise to Epstein for calling him out in public. In an email to the convicted sex offender, she wrote, and I quote, "I know you feel hellaciously let down by me from what you were either told or read, and I must humbly apologise to you and your heart for that." But she wasn't done grovelling there. She went on, "I was instructed to act with the utmost speed if I would have any chance of holding on to my career as a children's book author. As you know, I did not, absolutely not, say the P word, meaning paedophile, about you. But I understand it was reported that I did." For the avoidance of doubt, a spokesman for Sarah Ferguson admitted that the email was genuine, going on to offer a frankly pitiable excuse, which I will not dignify by repeating here. The point being, Fergie wanted to keep her friendship with Epstein and her public reputation so she could keep making money from children's books, of which she had published more than 50 since 1989. Sarah was clearly motivated entirely by money. Nothing else mattered. Not what he did, nor what she knew he had done. If perhaps you thought I was being too hard on Fergie when I suggested she had a lack of moral curiosity about anyone who might benefit her goals, I believe her admitted, pleading email to a paedophile should put any remaining concerns to rest. And as if you thought it couldn't get any worse, we had the 3rd sticky point for Fergie. In 2025, the Mail on Sunday revealed that Epstein apparently claimed that when he got out of jail, Fergie took Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, then aged 20 and 19, to visit him in New York. The source being an alleged email written to one of his lawyers in April 2011, saying that Sarah Ferguson was, and I quote, "the first to celebrate my release." Lest we forget, Epstein had pleaded guilty to charges he solicited prostitution from a minor. Even if we were to euphemistically refer to Fergie's alleged conduct at this time as demonstrating a lack of moral curiosity, that does not account for the fact that Epstein admitted he was guilty. No curiosity was required. Indeed, if proof were needed of her selective moral standards, you need look no further than the most recent release of Epstein documents from the 30th of January 2026. In them, we have the ex-Duchess allegedly writing to Epstein the following in an August 2009 email, and I quote, "Thank you, Jeffrey, for being the brother I've always wished for." For the avoidance of doubt, Epstein admitted in 2008 to soliciting sex from a 14-year-old girl in Florida and was subsequently sentenced in June that year to 18 months in prison, of which he served just 13 months, which meant he was barely 1 month out of jail on child prostitution charges when Fergie thanked him for being the brother I've always wished for. In the same email, she also says the following, "I have never been more touched by a friend's kindness than your compliment to me in front of my girls." Let me repeat that last part. Your compliment to me in front of my girls. Surely this can only mean Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, which would suggest Epstein's email claim about the ex-Duchess taking her young daughters to see him in New York shortly after his release in 2009 may indeed be credible. And the reason for such a visit is made abundantly clear in the same email, where Fergie thanks Epstein for what appears to be an introduction to someone at the American retail giant Target. She writes, and I quote, "Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I had the best discussion with Target on Friday. They want to get behind my entire Sarah Ferguson brand, books, etc. In other words, just like her ex-husband, the only thing she cared about were the contacts that Epstein provided. Nothing else about him mattered. Let's not forget that during his infamous 2019 Newsnight interview, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor denied regretting his relationship with Epstein, explaining, and I quote, "The people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn either by him or because of him were actually very useful," which I believe perfectly illustrates the fact that Andrew and Fergie really were made for each other after all. Which brings me to the final photograph I want to take a closer look at. Taken on the 16th of September 2025 at the funeral of Catherine, Duchess of Kent, at Westminster Cathedral, we see Fergie and Andy just 44 days before King Charles was to announce they would both lose all their titles and subsequently both be evicted from their cohabited residence, Royal Lodge. In my previous episode of Reading the Royals on the fall of the House of York, I quoted Ernest Hemingway on the subject of Andrew's sudden collapse of fortune. And when I look at this image, I'm compelled to quote the line from John Donne that inspired the title of Hemingway's most famous novel, "Therefore send not to know, for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." From the look on their faces, it's hard to not imagine them thinking exactly that. Too much scandal, nowhere left to hide. The reckoning we artfully slipped for so long is finally here. Time's up. When I began this exploration of the rise and fall of Fergie, I set out to answer a simple question. Was Sarah Ferguson a serial victim of circumstance, as she so often claimed? Or was she, to put it plainly, an inveterate chancer who, after decades of bluff and blaggery, found herself very suddenly, in her own words, stripped bare? The short answer is this. She was unquestionably, in one sense, the Del Boy Duchess. Even around the time this photograph was taken, she was being slammed in the press over two recently failed businesses. One, a crypto venture, the other, a lifestyle app that was alleged to have received up to £1 million in UK tax credits. She seemed to have spent her life seeking for the easy way to easy money, followed by delivering easy excuses when everything fell apart. And no wonder. The woman who was said to have once blown £25,000 in a single hour in Bloomingdale's was never going to inspire confidence in the boardroom. As you might imagine, Fergie saying herself, "Business just isn't my thing, darling." But there was another notable aspect to Del Boy, the heart of gold. No matter the gaffes, no matter the self-authored anarchy, no matter the shrapnel, when it came to doing the right thing, in the end, Del always came good. He might have been boorish, obnoxious, selfish, and even occasionally entitled, but he understood the line, which if you cross, there's no coming back. So was Sarah Ferguson the Del Boy Duchess? A wheeler dealer with a heart of gold? Short answer, no, she wasn't. She was only half a Del Boy. Would someone with a heart of gold associate with, apologise to, or even consider bringing their teenage daughter to meet a convicted sex offender? Hell no. And the consequences of that profound failing in the ex-Duchess have ultimately come home to roost, for what is surely the last time. In the final analysis, to call Fergie the Del Boy Duchess would frankly be an insult to Del Boy, meaning if somehow Sarah Ferguson was to manage to make one final miraculous comeback, that one will be on us, not her.